Hey y'all, welcome back to the Soft Landing Podcast, a gentle space for self-discovery. We're your hosts,
Rafaela
and Eric. This week, we're putting the key in kink as we talk all things BDSM.
That's funny. I love it. I love it. The key and kink. Come on, Eric. You be coming up with this stuff.
I try.
We're already kikiing.
Exactly.
You see how we did that? All right.
Oh, okay. Nothing vanilla about this conversation. And joining us this week to discuss the topic is Miss K. Miss K is a kink and sex educator and the founder of Deliciously Perverted. She's an active member of the Mark by CPI interactive space meant to strengthen the BDSM, fetish, and kink community in Nashville and beyond. She is also a member of Black Femdoms of Atlanta, and that's femme as in feminine, not fin as in financial. A co-founder of Nashville Fat Femme Collective, providing a safe space for folks who identify as fat and female. She also serves as dungeon coordinator for the Sex Down South Conference, which was created by two BIPOC women wanting to provide space for those who identify as BIPOC to explore their sexuality and kink, along with many other work endeavors, advocacy involvement, and personal interests. This lady is booked and busy. Welcome to the pod, Miss K.
Well, thank you so much.
So glad to have you here having this conversation. And so let's go ahead and start off with Eric's inquiry.
Yes, I'm really excited for this. Like, we have an official name for it for my little questions each week. So just to start off, I would really love for us to, think back about an aspect or practice of BDSM or kink that you remember that just made your eyes go wide with wonder and excitement.
Okay. So taking us back
to
our first or our earliest or our most of an experience or maybe realization or exposure to something.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that.
Going to my first kink party by accident.
By accident?
Accident.
You know you have to
Let me back up. I am a natural sci-fi and nerd geek. I love it. I go to sci-fi fantasy conventions.
Yes.
Been going since I was 15. I look older when I was for my age, so people mistaken me for 21. So they let me into a party. I read about kink. I wanted to explore kink. I found all the books about kink when I was a teenager. As my mom told me, research what you don't know and what you want to like.
Yes.
See where that finds us or leads us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I walk into this party and I see this beautiful woman with like half black, half white hair, spanking this guy over a bench, and I'm like, oh, yes, that looks fun.
So literally your eyes went wide and one.
The eyes went wild, and I was drooling. The gentleman came over, handed me a napkin and a drink. I was like, yeah. And we were talking, and he was like, then he realized I wasn't 21. So I gave him the drink back. I was nice. But he told me I could stay and learn. So it turns out, I forgot her name, but she was really sweet. She was like, do you want to know what I'm doing? Yes. So I stepped up to the bench and she was showing me, how she was spanking the guy, how she did this, how I had to ask permission to touch him. He was all right. He was giggling when he saw me, I guess, because he's like, ooh, new girl, new woman. And this just went downhill. And the party was for 2 nights, because the sci-fi conventions I use a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night. And the parties are normally Fridays and Saturdays. So they had another night. I went in, watched people with I mostly watched, but they taught me things. And they say, you're not to participate, you can just watch, which was like a great deal I passed on to other people. Seeing people on these makeshift St. Andrew's crosses, music going on, people getting sweaty, people moaning. I was in heaven.
Wow.
So I kept seeking places where I can go and bask in this.
I love that. Yeah. Right? If you went on your first one by accident, what is it like when you go on purpose?
On purpose is another story.
So you were around 14, 15, you said, when that experience happened. When was...
No, I was 18. I was 18. I started going to sci-fi conventions at 15,
Oh,
and
okay.
my first experience was 18. I was legal.
Okay, gotcha. Never mind then.
Oh man.
Now I don't want to get my friends in trouble. I still know them. They still run the parties there at certain conventions.
Right,
But
because my eyes did
yeah.
go big
Yeah.
when you were saying. I was like, wait a minute. So they just let you? Okay, thanks for
Like I
clarifying.
said, I
That's
look
really
old for my
important.
age. I look older when I was a teenager and 18 years old. People thought I
Right.
was 20, 21. 21, I was 18. I was like, nope,
Yeah, well, that's not as
still a
bad as
baby.
you being 14 and them thinking you were 21. So, because I had some questions, but we're good now. We're good.
Yes, we're good. I love
We're
that.
good. We're
18,
good.
21, not too
Um,
bad.
No.
Before we go any deeper, did you have something for your?
mhm.
Oh, yes. Do you also have one or?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So I think this one, it's like this porn actor named Cage Jock.
Mm-hmm.
And so first off, Cage Jock, so he does a lot of chassis stuff, which is basically, a cage around his penis that he keeps under lock and key. And there was a scene that he was in where he was, had on his chassis cage and then used a giant strap on to fuck someone else. And they were also caged. And it was just like a total little weird mind fuck going around that I was like, but you're caged and he's caged, but you're still fucking him. And oh my gosh, my brain was just like, oh wow. Like because up to that point, erroneously had never thought of someone with a penis using a strap on.
Yeah, not using their penis.
Exactly.
I mean,
and
really.
it was just
Oh,
like,
that's a norm in some cases.
yeah.
I've seen it in clubs, and some people are starting to do that because sometimes they feel like their penis is inadequate, so they just use a strap on because it's more power, makes them feel better. I'm like, do?
Yeah, you can have fun with it too, right? Like, well, I want to have this penis for today.
Yeah, for sure. I know someone who brings their own
Yeah.
to parties just for their own peace of mind, and yeah, this is what I want to use, and I know it's cleaned and everything, so I'm ready to go. Mm-hmm.
Oh man, but yeah, I just thought it was like really fun, and again, eyes wide and lots of excitement. Like, this new thing.
It's just an exposure to something you wouldn't have conceived about on your own.
Exactly. Yes.
And so, yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
My first play party, I was, going through group chats. This tells you how old I am. Going through like the Moo, our IRC in college, just trying to find places to go. And the first party I went to was a goth club in the Carolinas called Purgatory. It was an eye-opener because I realized that I was the only Black there. I was again the minority, but I didn't care. My friends treated me well. They made sure I was taken care of. Again, they told me if you don't want to play with somebody, you don't have to. You can watch. I got to learn how to use a flogger. I got the chance to, meet other people, and all those desires and all those things I would dream about and read about. I didn't feel like I was alone. And I actually got to I kept corresponding with people, online, because I'm from Nashville, and I didn't know there was a local community here. I didn't know until 2003. So from there, I heard about PEP in Atlanta, which was Lady D. And funny enough, I actually was trying to interview her for a class project, AKA, she's like, why don't you come down and, come to the dungeon sometime? So I would call her, email her, I would go down to Atlanta, 3.5 hours from school, and go to play parties like almost once a month when I was in college.
I'm thinking about the cost. The travel cost.
Well,
I'm like,
back in the day,
the
gas was cheap. Gas was cheap back in the day. It wasn't this.
It's probably
it was still $1 or $2. It was in the 90s.
I was gonna say it's
gas
like
was
80,
cheap.
90 something cents a gallon. I remember those days.
Oh yeah.
Quickly faded.
I remember those days, and I also had a gas card.
Okay.
That was paying off. I did pay it. So I would go there like for the goth scene there. I would go like one night I would go to a goth club where my friends would dance and have fun. And then next night I'll probably go to PEP Atlanta and I saw more people more black. I saw a more diverse group. I saw more blacks there than I have at other places I went to go, other places I was invited to, or munches, because it was like, oh, good. And I got to play. I learned more lovely things. I learned some things that are very wrong, but so right.
Yeah,
Like,
well, we'll definitely get into some of that.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people wonder about their identities, right? Trying to understand them, finding a name for them, validating them. So I would love to know, if you are open to sharing, when did you have an idea, or when did you know that you were kinky? Maybe before you maybe even knew of that terminology.
Looking back, I like to tie up my baby dolls, my Barbies.
Oh.
I didn't like Barbies, but I love to tie them up, punish them, put them in awkward situations.
Okay.
And then I guess my first girlfriend in high school, she kind of liked spanking, and so did I. So we're like, okay. So we just kept it on the down low, because, our parents would not like this. And again, I got more curious. So my mom was like, if you're curious about something, just go to the damn library. I was like, okay. So I went to the library and found all this information about kink. Wow. I found a lot of eroticas too, like the story of, the Beauty series by Anne Rice, and a couple of her books. Anise Nin, I found a lot of eroticas from her. In fact, I think my school librarian in high school was got quite shocked when she saw me read Little Birds by Anise Nin, and it has a couple of kink scenes in it. And she recommended I put paper bag wrapper, those around your books, so I can read it in public.
Yeah.
So the nuns won't get me.
The nuns.
Kay is so studious, always reading. The
the nuns were like, "You always reading in the book." I'm like,
Was this at Catholic school? If there were nuns involved? Oh.
Yeah, I went to all girls Catholic school.
I mean, Catholic school is kinky in itself. There's BDSM. Are we going to care
Yes,
ourselves about that? I don't know if there's any research on this, but I really wonder how many folks went to Catholic schools and are now identify as kinky.
Well, funny enough, I ran into somebody in junior high school who at one time, and we both looked at each other, and I was like, he goes, "I know you." I was like, "No, you don't. This is my first time seeing you at this party." And he whispered in my ear, he whispered the name of our school, and I went, "Oh, fuck." I was like, "Yeah, we went to the same school." Like, shit.
I love those
He's
situations.
a year behind
There's
me.
no reason to be ashamed, because we are both here.
Right? Like, I see you.
I see you. You see me. Yes. We were here together.
Yes.
It's like when people try to get you in trouble for doing something, but what were you doing there? How did you know I was there if you weren't there?
Exactly. Don't point the finger at me.
Right.
So we've been talking a bit, and I want us to maybe also do some ground setting for those who are listening and like, what are all these things you're talking about? Oh my gosh. Maybe this is their moment where they are having a lot of wide open eyes and excitement as they're hearing about all these things and getting so excited. So I'd love for us to maybe just talk about, what does BDSM stand for? What is it? And like, what is kink, and how are they different?
Okay.
Well, BDSM is a couple of different things. It's B stands for the bondage, D is for discipline, S is for sadistic, M is for masochistic. And then sometimes if you mix it up, like sometimes people think of the S as a slave or a master because it's a power exchange. Dominance, dominance, all of that. I guess for me, the thing is, the difference is sometimes, as we know, kink is like something that turns you on. That's the way I tell people. It's something that it's nothing you can't live without, but that's an extra thing that just makes you gooey and melty, that you're just having like these vapors afterwards because you're doing the thing that turns you on so hot. For me, BDSM is more of a power exchange between both a person that's the giver or the top and the receiver, the bottom. More of that with the acronym BDSM. And the kink is taking that into the power exchange and releasing some of that sexual tension. For example, I can give you an example if you like.
Yeah.
For some people, they love spanking. Like you have the nun and the schoolboy. Going back to the Catholic thing,
Right.
perfect example.
Uh-huh.
How the nun sitting there, she purposely has the boy has pulled his pants down. The boy is a legal male, an adult. Let's put that out there before someone thinks I'm talking about a child.
Right.
Pulling the pants down, purposely the penis is right between her legs and bottom is up, and she's spanking him. And you can tell he's getting an erection because it's turning him on, because not only did the power change between her because she's the giver, he's the receiver, he's getting turned on by this. The point where when they finish, they go somewhere else and finish off. Have fun in the dark corner. Same thing for priest and schoolgirl. Confessing your sins and you're getting swats you get in a flogging, which is back in the Christian history I learned they used to do flagellation or spanking, and they're both getting off on it. That's their kink.
Okay, thank you for breaking that down.
Yeah.
I also wanted to add for the D and S, it can also stand for discipline, in addition to the dominance or domination, and then S for the sadism. And oftentimes when people use SM, it's sadomasochism or the sadist masochist. So, you have the 4 letters that end up actually representing several things for that one letter.
Which, whoever came up with the structure for those initials, genius. Truly. Whoever was like, you know what? We can make this work a lot of different ways. Bravo.
Yeah. And it's so intertwined. I think people are still discovering components of their own sexuality when they start to kind of comb through it a little bit more finely, because then you do see it broken down into that dynamic of, yes, I like the feeling of being dominated or being submissive, in addition to that sadist part or that masochistic part that is involving the spanking and or flogging, whatever the case is, and or the discipline of not doing what I was told or following whatever agreement that we had. And so but Catholic school.
That's one example. Or some people think it's cathartic for them because they're working through. I didn't think it was cathartic for me, but with some of my partners in the past, I always thought it was when they do a scene, we do it very renegotiated, very structurally, is to get things out of their system. Like if they had a hard day and they just like, can you beat the shit out of me? And I'm going, okay, remember your safe word. What instruments do you want to use? What is the cathartic feeling you want to have? Do you want me making you cry? Do you want to just feel like, do you just want to just drop after spending so much energy of me, being the giver, the top on you? For some people, and some people use it as trauma work too, which can get a little dark.
Yeah, but I think they're really great pieces to add to this because, how people enter into the space around BDSM can be also for a lot of different reasons. And so I think that helps other people who are listening hopefully recognize, like, there's no one way of doing this or showing up in this space, that there's a lot of different ways that people are kind of coming into it and what they're also looking to get out of it.
And also reminding folks that being kinky or being into BDSM is not a pathological thing. It oftentimes is pathologized from folks who don't have a good understanding of it. And then people can be very critical or judgmental, wondering, like, why would you want to be beaten and spanked and degraded and all this other stuff? And did something happen to your child, or did you have trauma? And also, maybe, one, maybe that may have nothing to do with it. And there are also some folks who use BDSM role plays and dynamics as a corrective experience to some of their trauma. So I do specialize in kink as a healing approach for folks. And I've worked with so many different people and talked to a lot of folks who have been able to get their needs met using kink when that need wasn't met in other relationships and or from their childhood attachment concerns. And so it can be very powerful, but also not everyone uses for that. Some people, it's just a fun, good time, and it's not related to their anxiety or their trauma or their shame. It's just a Friday night. And then for others, it can be both integrative when it comes to trauma healing, or cathartic when you've just had a long day and you wanted to fight someone, so you go home and say, hey, let's role play this scene where I get to spank you a little bit and do that that release of energy in the body, right? Completing that cycle, that stress cycle.
Right.
So love that you brought that up.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you said there's no true way, because it's one thing that when I came into the scene, being BDSM Kink, that people thought there was one true way, and then after a while there's no one true way. I tell people the one way I tell people is true is make sure you're safe, make sure you know what you're doing, make sure you vet the person, know the person who they are, and just have fun. I love it how Midori, I'm going to quote her, because I've heard this many times. A dungeon is like an adult playground. You get to have fun. You get to have that fun that you didn't have as a kid, and just explore all the things you want to do. And sometimes I tell people, just have fun. Just but clean up.
Just have fun. Yeah, I mean, it's a place that so many people get to use the imagination and interact with themselves or other people in really unique ways that we don't often have in other spaces. And I love emphasizing the word play when we're talking about BDSM and kink, to really emphasize that playful component, that imaginative and creative component that comes up, and the collaborative component too, because we're getting ready to do something and we have to be on the same page. It's like I'm thinking about Uno, and but everyone has different rules. Everyone has different rules for Uno, right?
Yes,
based on your family, where you live. And so before you play Uno, you have to sit down and say, listen, how do you play? Right?
Right. Yeah.
Same thing with kink, y'all. So you might have some of these skills already. But yeah, you have to sit down and you talk about the safe words, as you already mentioned, Miss K. We're also talking about what we want to get out of it, which you also mentioned, and just making sure that the game, the scene feels good to everyone who's going to be involved.
Absolutely.
And one more thing, make sure the person knows what they're doing, because when I have DM, or back in my younger days when I didn't know what I'm doing, some people had no right doing certain things, and I'm like, that doesn't look safe.
Yeah.
AKA they didn't know what they're doing and people get hurt, and I'm like,
oh, absolutely.
Occasionally I go up to people and I'm like, do you know what you're doing? Not really. I'm practicing on a live person. Yeah.
That's really, really important.
Yeah, I used to tell people, do what you know. I mean, you never know. Everybody like what you know. So
I like that reminder. You are enough. There's someone. There's someone out there who might want that thing, but also meet with people and get some training and some education so that you are doing it correctly and safely. Because now that BDSM is more in our culture than ever, people see things online, they watch movies, and they're like, oh, I want to do that.
Yes.
And they're really harming other people and not asking the right questions to make sure whoever is going to be doing the thing on them is competent in that thing. And so, yeah, you have to ask those questions when you talk about safety, and we can talk about that a little bit later. Like, what do you want to really pay attention to when it comes to consent and safety? Safety isn't just about, is this safe? But it also includes, does this person know what they're doing and they can do it safely?
Yes.
Yes, and watching out for those red flags of the hell no, we're not going to do that.
What are some red flags, Ms. K?
Red flags of telling people there's no such thing, that they have no safe word.
Yeah.
I tell people, when you hear that, run.
Right.
For sure. As fast as you can. Get out
That's fast as you can, and tell other people so they can avoid it.
Ooh, speaking of that's a good practice too, of asking around about people. Like, hey, I met this person, who has played with them, who can vouch for them.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I tell people who want to play with me, if you want someone to vouch, these are people who see me play, or, and if they're still nervous about playing with me, I'm like, you don't have to play with me tonight. You can just watch me play someone else, and we can discuss it later after I finish aftercare.
Yes.
Yeah, another big thing is that, since we have the internet and stuff, and people telling people like what they're going to do to people, just automatically just, telling them right off the bat, I'm going to do this to you, I'm going to do that to you, I'm going to strap you up, I'm going to do this, I'm going to gag you, without any input from the other person. That's a red flag in itself.
So not checking in
not checking in and just basically telling somebody, instead of being like a corroboration between two people or whoever involved in the scene,
right,
what's going to happen, and yes, no, maybe finding out what's good, what people like. I've seen people just tell people what we're going to do, and that's that. Run.
Yeah, I think that speaks to, in my head, the going back to the BDSM being so much more a part of our culture, and this idea of like, what does it mean to be dominant with someone? Like I see that in my head right now, like someone thinking this is how I'm supposed to dom someone, is to tell them this is what I'm going to do to you, this is how it's going to happen, you don't have any choice in it. And in my head, I'm like, no.
Yeah, I mean, people who are not educated, if they are the bottom or submissive, they may have been told, taught, or believed that I don't get to say things here.
Right.
I am supposed to fully submit in this way. That means I don't have a say-so. And that is not accurate at all.
Yeah. I also saw the opposite, where we have bottoms who teach tops. There's some good ones out there, and there's some bad ones. There are some bottoms who will use a top as a pest dispenser, tell them what they want to do. Even the top does not feel comfortable doing some certain things because of their skill level, just so that person get that high of being beaten or, doing things to them that, the top doesn't feel comfortable, and they've been told what to do. It's kind of like a topping from the bottom, which is a phrase some people use in that situation.
And it's not mutually collaborative
and also tell
or
them
pleasurable, right? And I think that's something that we really want to highlight, is that if we're saying that this is a fun place, everyone needs to have fun. It's not a unilateral experience of funness. And if that's the case, we really need to check in and make some changes.
I think now that's been a movement lately, and I tell people I do this for myself, that the bottoms are not the only ones that have a safe word. Tops do as well. I've safe word on people when I'm like, nah, this is not going well. That they can actually say that as well, not just the bottoms, the people who are receiving, who they're corroborating with. That's all I'd say. That's what I'm thinking at the moment, thinking that's something I've seen of lately as well.
And I think that's really important to bring into the conversation, because even now you have education where it reminds submissives and bottoms that they have the power and what they say goes, in the sense of, if there's, I hear often, if there's no one to bottom, then there's no play.
Yeah. Yeah.
And working with trauma survivors, that can be really tough when there's people pleasing, when there's low confidence, there's uncertainty, there's fear. And so I really try to teach people that and remind people everyone has power, even if you're offering up some of your power to someone else. That doesn't mean that, only one person has a safe word or one person makes all of the choices and the decisions. But how do we create a space where everyone feels good about the dissemination and use of power within this play and scene? And it's really important for doms too, because doms have trauma history.
Yeah.
And they could feel really in the mindset of, well, I have to be strong, I have to be this, I shouldn't ask questions, I should know exactly what I'm doing, and I should have all the answers, and hesitate to, because they're also people pleasing. So it can go so many ways, and we have to be mindful of this message of, we're trying to empower people, but our society, we have a complicated relationship with power. We struggle with sharing power and want to have power over people. And I think people get off on that for a variety of reasons. We have to remember, like, this is not that. At least that's not the goal. Not to say that people don't misuse and abuse kink and BDSM. But when we're doing it in a healthy and even healing way, it has to have a component of it being collaborative.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, as someone who I have a mental illness, and sometimes when I'm corroborating with people, I usually tell people these are my hard limits, and I tell people the way I described when we were corroborating with other people and we're discussing, negotiating. I have this is what I like, these are soft limits, and these are hard limits. Some of those hard limits I tell people are triggers for me, and they're the hell no's. If you want to try those, there's someone else that will probably like those limits. But for me, I'm like, no, I like to keep my sanity, be able to have my happy time. I tell people I'm finna go to my happy place and go play.
We need that.
Yeah. And that ability to advocate for ourselves in those moments too. So important.
And to walk away. Like, there can be so much
Yes.
pressure, especially at play parties and dungeons, and to have a certain experience or outcome. And we talked about this in one of our other episodes on dungeons
Yes,
and
sex
play
clubs,
parties.
yeah.
But you can go in with this idea of what you want to experience that may feel like internalized pressure to create a certain outcome that then makes us self-betray and not listen to our gut or ignore red flags. So that's really a good reminder that in BDSM, consent and boundaries are the pinnacle of a lot of the conversations in education, and we have to get better at it for sure.
Yeah, and I usually tell when I teach the classes that no is a complete sentence.
Absolutely. No, it's a complete sentence. And with that, let's go ahead and take our first break so we can come back and dig deeper into consent.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's do it.
All right. And welcome back, listeners. So we were just starting to dig into some conversations around consent. And so we'd love to talk more about what role does it play in BDSM and kink spaces, and what does that process look like?
The process of that for me is that, like, when I give people tours or when I do Set the Dungeon and Sets Down South, I give people some guidelines of what's allowed, what's not allowed, so they know what to expect. To tell them that you do not have to do anything, and tell them what consent is. And I sometimes have to give a definition of consent. And I also tell people, you can revoke that consent. If you don't feel like you don't want to do anything, you can tell people, sorry, I'm taking that consent back away from what I'm about to do, because I don't feel comfortable or because it's crossing my boundaries. And I tell people, do not feel guilty about that, because listen to your gut. Because if you're consenting to something just because this other person's pressuring you or trying to coerce you into doing something, then you're not going to have a good time, and your boundaries are going to be crossed because you did something that you didn't want to do and they violated your consent.
So you mentioned that you sometimes give a definition of consent. Can you share what that definition is?
Yeah, my definition is usually you given permission to participate in an activity or in something that does not cause harm to you or to others.
Okay. So centering on that permissive piece, and then I'm hearing you also talk about being able to revoke it at any time as needed. So what does negotiating consent and creating a play scene entail?
I used to tell people don't do it in the dungeon, or just find a quiet space and getting to know the person. I have a cheat sheet I give people. I call it dance cards, where basically you go over from basics of what name do you want to go by in the scene. You might not want to use your real name. You might want to be called something else. Go over your safe words. If you don't have a safe word, use the traffic light, which is green for go, yellow for slow down, or hey, let's stop, let's take a breather. Or you might want to tell the person to switch up different implements, and red means stop the complete scene, just stop it completely. And then you go over your limits of what each person wants to try, what to do. And the more you talk about that, the more you start developing a kind of scene in each other's head that you want to do. And then describe some soft limits of, like, if someone, let's say, like, hey, I like to fist you, and then the other person's like, Maybe not with you, maybe not this time. Like, okay, that's kind of a soft limit. That's a stream one. Um, or may I kiss you? And the person like, no, that might be a soft limit for them not to kiss another person, but just the person they're dating. And then you talk about hard limits. Hard limits are those things that, no ands, if or buts. You don't do those. You don't do those things at all. Another thing some people don't consider is, do you want to do anything sexual? And what does that mean to you?
Yeah.
Your definition. Because I know at my play space and in the dungeon when we do Sex Down South, we do allow penetration or sometimes the sexual acts like oral, anal, what have you. And sometimes you have to define that barrier of, are you going to do this or you're not going to do this? And if you are going to do it, talk about your STI status. That's actually, I can send you a copy that's on my card. Some people bypass that, say no, they don't want to do anything sexual. They're like, okay. And then talk about, what does aftercare mean for you? And I tell people aftercare is what grounds you after doing a scene or after you play with somebody. What brings you back to earth? Does cuddling, like for me, cuddling with somebody brings me back to my senses. Some people it's eating chocolate. For some people, it's a back massage. I know one of my friends loves a steak dinner after he has a good scene, after he tops somebody. And just keeping in touch with that person, either by, if you don't have their phone number, by social media, just checking in on that person a couple of days later just to see, how are you doing? Did you drop? Which is, did you have an emotional regret about this? You want to talk to somebody about it. Or you're still feeling high and you want to talk about how all these feelings are coming out and you're going, I can't believe I did this. I love this. Can we do it again? And then you start building up that relationship, that negotiation with that person.
I have so many thoughts. You just talked about so many things that I loved. I think the first thing I want to talk about or bring attention to what you mentioned was this piece around like sex and BDSM. I think is really important because I think there is often a conflation of, well, if you're doing BDSM, sex is going to be involved. And that's just not the case. And so I love that you brought that into a space of that should be what you're discussing as well. It's like, what is on the table sexually? And because for some people, they want that to be part of the scene. And for others, they're like, no, I just want you to spank me. I don't need you to touch my genitals or me touch yours to enjoy that process. And so I really enjoyed that piece. And I think that the dance cards, so I don't know if we mentioned this piece, but with each episode, each week, we definitely work to create a worksheet for people so they can really dig deeper into the topic for themselves and getting that opportunity to have that space for self-discovery. And so I think something like that, the dance card, would be a really cool resource for us to share with people, because that's something they can actually take with them into these spaces to be like, okay, I have something in my toolbox that I know I can rely on to help me have the experience that I want to have.
Right. And I do that purposely when I host parties and I know people are new, because when we go over the rules, I say, hey, by the way, I know some of you went to Kink 101 or Welcome to Kink class and you probably forgot how to negotiate. You probably get nervous. Here's a dance card. Then I explain what the dance card is. Tell people to pick one. Take a card from the deck. Do not write on it. That's just your reference point. And I know that it makes a difference, and people are not as nervous when they're talking to each other because they're like, look at the card, and they're actually thinking all these really deep and think about, okay, what do I want from this experience with this other person? It makes me happy because they get happy too.
I love that.
We like structure.
Yeah.
Our brains like it and appreciate it, even when it's amidst some unknowns in terms of what is this experience going to be like. I may have planned out everything with my play partner of what my signals are going to be or my safe words, how long, how intense, but it's still going to be different with each time, just based on where I'm at mentally, emotionally, and physically, and different play partners. And so you can have your chaos in there, but let's also have the structure.
Controlled chaos.
Yes, controlled chaos.
You mean organized chaos?
Organized chaos.
Yeah, organized chaos.
Yes, organized chaos. We love it. And I think also, I don't know if we've mentioned this either, but do we want to talk about what exactly are safe words?
Yeah, safe words are basically your way of knowing how to gauge the person, how to know if you're having a fun time or when you know you need to stop and we need to discuss and debrief and this and if they're in distress. My first safe word I used to use was banana, which made no sense to some people because I couldn't tell. Because at the time I used to be a switch, so I used to top or bottom until one of my dear friends was like, "Okay, here's a traffic light. Okay, they're like, if you want to continue stuff, then what does green means? Go, yeah, keep going. Yellow means a couple of different things. It doesn't mean necessarily stop. It might be me either slow down. Hey, can we take a break? Or, hey, can you adjust me if I'm being, restrained? Or you might be hitting me too hard with something else. Let's change something. And when someone says yellow, you just kind of communicate with that person. And if you hear the word red, that means you stop. You put the instruments down, or you keep your hands to yourself. You take the person's being restrained, unbuckle them. Start doing the aftercare, bringing them grounded back to them, because that means that person might be in some distress. You might have triggered that person. They use your safe word, or they might be revoking that consent, going, "Hey, this is not what I signed up for.
Right.
I thought this would be a good thing, but I'm revoking it, so I'm seeing red."
I also want to add an option for people to consider signals. Just because, there may be a time where someone goes nonverbal, or maybe you're playing with someone who is not verbal in that way to use those type of words. And so being able to have signals. Also, if someone is gagged and they cannot talk, or if they become dissociated or triggered, like what are some other things that they can do to signal, hey, we need to stop, or you need to check in. So I know some folks, especially if they do some bondage and their hands are free, they may hold a scarf, and so then they will release it to signal, hey, we need to check in. And so, I like to have all of that on the table as a possibility, because you just never know what your response may be, and you don't want to, like, well, my safe word was banana, but I can't really say it out loud right now. And also at the same time, I want to remind people that people come out of their bodies. They so many different experiences are bound to happen, but as the top or the dom, we also have to just be able to check in physically and visually to notice what's going on. And even if it feels like, man, I don't want to, what if this disrupts them, or whatever the case is, if you are uncertain, or if you're getting a gut feeling, like you mentioned several times, listen to your gut, check in with your bottom or your sub. Even if you're like, oh, sorry, I thought you were maybe feeling something, but you're good. Okay, great. Let's go back to it. So we don't always have to rely on, they're going to tell me no when they're ready. They're going to say red when they're ready. They're going to drop this scarf when they're ready. I'm feeling something. Let me check in.
Right. And a lot of times when I check in with people, I'm like if they're restrained, I feel their hands cold, I start moving it. I don't say a word. I'll just move it down to where their hands be comfortable. Or I tell people, I go up to them, because I started developing watching people, their body language, and I can tell, for some reason, I can tell when people stop breathing in the middle of a scene. They just hold that breath in. And it gets kind of scary, so I'll go up to them and whisper, "Hey, can you do me a favor? Can you start breathing, please?" And they start giggling, because I realize they've been holding all this in while playing. Well, I'm playing, I'm topping them, and they're like, "Oh, sorry." I said, "No, just making sure, just breathe." Or just, touch the body. Like if you're a top, the dominant, touching their body, making sure the body temperature is the way it is. Because you're going to either it's going to be really hot. If it gets too hot, you might want to just take a break. If it gets too cold, it means something's wrong. You need circulation's wrong, or, they're not responsive. You need to check them off. You need to stop the scene.
I think those are all really great tips that speak to some of the safety pieces too that should be involved when we're talking about, engaging in these play scenes. And so are there any other safety protocols that people should consider when they are going into play scenes?
When I see people who are beginners, they might not like this ideal, but it tends to work, is don't play, watch. especially people who you want to top, who you want to either top or you want to bottom to. Watch them that night. Watch them a couple of nights. Watch and see what that person's protocol is, how to negotiate. If you're a good top, you won't mind somebody listening on the conversation. I've had people ask me, hey, I want to know how you negotiate. Do you mind me sitting there while you're talking to the person? I'm like, sure, not a big deal. They're not trying to keep a big secret. And if that person is not exactly open, you kind of want to question that. Do you really want to be topped by this person or bottom by this person? And if you do decide to play the next time you come as a new person, ask around, ask what the rules are. Because sometimes I've seen bottoms and even tops break rules because they didn't ask what's allowed, what's not allowed in certain spaces.
Yeah.
Which is important because that can get you either kicked out or be like, if the DM, the dungeon monitor is like, oh, you didn't know this rule. Okay, this, you didn't pay attention. This is why you can't do this. And for Pete's sake, don't be offended if that person calls you out or tells you, hey, you can't do that, or hey, that's something we don't allow here.
Yeah. I really love this mention of the rules that dungeons have that can feel just really grounding for people to know, okay, there are some protocols in place and I'll need to learn them because different dungeons and spaces will have different rules and protocols. So I think it's really important for people to know that. On the other side of safety, I think it's also important to consider what you need for your scene. So if you're tying people up, you're going to need something to, like if there's an emergency situation, you're not going to be able to take all those ties and knots loose. You're going to need some scissors, right? You may need some type of kit for if there's any blood or if there's an injury, how can you tend to those type of things? So consider the type of play that you're doing. And I always have people reflect on what can go wrong, what has gone wrong, what did I need, what could I use, so you can be prepared as possible for those things or when those things, if those things happen.
All right.
Yeah, and I also tell people, and people used to laugh at me, then they realize there's a reason why I'm always over prepared in my toy kit, because I've seen good, bad, and ugly. There's no such thing as being over prepared. Like you said, keep a pair of EMT scissors in case you have to cut somebody out of the rope. Don't use a blade. Keep a first aid kit in your back. I always keep one, even though my personal dungeon and when I run the dungeon down that sets down south, we have 2 kits we keep. So someone gets hurt, no basic first aid, that kind of thing. Also, people need to know like how to use their equipment is a big thing. Like if you don't know how to use it, you'd be surprised. Most spaces will be more happy to show you how to use it. Like if you don't know how to use a flogger, we have to show you to do it. Spanker, not how to use it. Rope. Oh, there may be a lot of people show you how to do basic ties and stuff. There's no such thing as keeping everything, secretive, or you haven't earned the right to learn this shit. Kind of deal.
Wow, definitely a lot of things for folks to think about. So with that, let's take another break and we'll come back to finish it out. And we're back. So we just talked a lot about, consent and safety. Want to also start thinking about what does that all look like in practice when we get to some of these spaces. So start off the bat, like how can, curious folks, first timers begin to explore their BDSM and kink interests?
Go to a munch. A munch is a non-kink setting, non-BDSM setting in a restaurant where you meet other people that are like you. We don't dress kinky. We don't try to out people. We just get together, usually sometimes in the private dining room or like the far end of a restaurant where you can tell, contact the person first about who runs the munch and they'll let you know who to look for. And you get to know people in your space. You get to know people that are part of the community. And you might find somebody that will sponsor you to go to a party or to a club, which is in some places if you do it that route. I mentioned sloshes. Sloshes where it's kind of like the same thing, but you meet up in a bar and people are talking, getting together, talking about the scene, talking, getting to know each other, just basically knowing what's in the community. If you're luckily like I am, and in some spaces, some places have classes
Right.
to get to know the community as well. And some of those classes are held in the dungeons and in dungeons play spaces, where you get to see what's going on, you get to learn about basic things like kink, what is BDSM, what kind of roles you do, what do we do, what are the protocols, what are the rules. You kind of go to those classes because those are important because you also get to meet other people too. You get to meet friends, you get to meet people that you can talk to that have questions, and even you might meet a play partner at these places. And then that probably leaves you to go into a play party or to a club where you can actually, have fun, get to know these things, remember the things you learn, and you get to see, and you probably see other people from your classes and lunches you go to. You see a friendly face, so you know, hey, someone's there I like, someone there I know I can trust. We're good, and all of that. On the other tail end of that are the conference parties. If you go to, I'm laughing because it happened to me because I went to a sci-fi convention, went to a kink party. Some people go to like a conference that has a play party, and that's their first time. If you're at a conference like FrolicCon, Float, if you go to a leather conference, I would highly suggest go to their 101 class just to know what the rules are, what's the protocol there. Talk to people. Make sure you know the rules. Don't get offended if someone asks you to send a consent form, meaning you know what's going on, that you can leave at any time if something triggers you. Some places might ask you not to record anything because what you see here stays here at the conference party.
For sure.
And that how you can identify the dungeon monitors, the play space monitors, how you can identify them at those events. And have fun.
Have fun.
I know you mentioned Sex Down South a couple of times, so I love their little bang, big bang, to kind of give people an opportunity to do what you've been suggesting, is just watch some of the entertainment components that can sometimes show up.
Yeah.
And they also have dungeons and play parties and play spaces, and that can also be great for mini exposures and just watching, and or if you want to play, you can do that.
Yes, and I'm sorry I keep mentioning that because that was one of the first conferences that I saw people of color like me. We weren't like, and people playing and people having fun and people not feeling, and seeing people relieved that those things we consider taboos, especially as Black and brown people, doing these things, seeing that it's okay to do this. And they're having fun and they're asking questions, and most people are like, oh sure, let me, they're answering and whatever. They're like, I'm sorry to disturb you, and they're like, oh no, let me finish the scene, then we can go over and talk some more about what I'm doing. And I see people being helpful, and I see people like when they go the first time, I'm like, oh, this is what I'm missing. How can I do this more? Then again, I tell people if you're in certain areas, go to munch. That's when I go to the munching classes and stuff like that.
I'm glad you brought up, Sex Down South and talking about your experience of that being a space where you're like, oh, there's other Black people like me here. And you talked about this in the beginning too, but wondering if you can speak more to like, this idea of BDSM being this predominantly white, able-bodied, affluent space, and what has that looked like for you to really navigate that, and what can other people who are trying to get into it but might have, more marginalized identities do to find the spaces that might be affirming for them?
I'm glad it's different from where I was back in the day, late 90s, early 2000s. I started getting more and more involved. When you saw another Black person, you were very happy, but depending on how they acted towards you or their role in the scene, can sometimes be jarring for me. I knew a couple of times that I had to watch and make sure. I was kind of like hesitant playing with certain people because I didn't know if they were playing for me because of me or because it was something to check off their list, like a fetish, or they're
Yeah.
like, oh, I get to play with a black woman. Oh, black fat woman, I get to play with her, or check that off my list. I've never done that, or people say things and I had to start calling people out, which I knew some places were not comfortable. If they weren't, I didn't go to those spaces anymore.
Mm.
And there were times when people would invite me to those spaces who were my friends. I'm like, nope, I did not feel comfortable. And they say, why? And I'm like, I point to my skin. I'm like, no, people have said things that weren't nice, or people made assumptions. I'll give you one example. I went to a party and I was meeting friends there, and the host automatically thought I was a submissive. He automatically thought, because he heard from our friends I used to switch, thought that I might have changed to bottom. Was trying to push me in a situation. I was like, no, I'm a top. I said, if you hit me, I'm gonna hit you back, and I hit you harder. And he thought I was kidding, so he decided to whap me on the ass, and I was like, okay, bend over. He started giggling, and then when I hit him, he goes, ow, that hurt. I was like, now, are we gonna make an assumption again, make an ass of yourself? And my friends came and we left because he kept going on and on about the fact that I really don't know my role.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
And then I used to get, yeah, I used to get emails. And then also when I started the online thing, before that, people would send me emails of race play and stuff of that nature that was like going to depths with me on email, and I would like block.
Mm. I mean, also, you didn't consent to that.
It
You
was,
didn't
it
ask
was,
Right.
for that at all, for
Yeah.
them to make that assumption.
no. And I had to make it, and I would put in my profile what I was a hard limit for me, and that was one of my hard limits. And it's like, and it was for not just males, it was also females. And I'd be like, oh God, I thought y'all would have some common sense and be like, no, you do not. But I've seen it gotten, I would say, better. There's still some people out there who are not considerate and who
Mm.
have these stereotypes of what they think if they see a person of color in the scene, who they think how they should act or how they should, behave, or they should behave, all of that bullshit. I still see that occasionally, but I also see people calling it out more and making known that it's not tolerated in certain spaces, in those spaces.
Yeah, there's this really good talk by Madam Posh, who is a rigger in the rope community, who talks about being a black woman specifically and being in the rope community, and how so many people, one, may assume that black women are tops and doms because of the strong black woman stereotype. And that they don't want to be tied up, or they don't want to be submissive and things like that. So I think there are so many assumptions that follow us. And even in these spaces where it's like we are letting all of these stereotypes down, we're free, we're open, we're trying these kinky things that society says are problematic and weird and strange, and yet we still fall into these patterns of assumption and fetishizing and boxing people in, which we talked about in another podcast. But it comes up in the sex world
It
as
does.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially when and the thing is, it's kind of strange because I didn't get that when I started. Everybody thought I was a bottom at first. Because the other thing, I think the other reason why I thought I was bottom, because I wanted to know what it's like to be a bottom so I can be a better top to that person I top. So there'd be some people I would bottom to because I knew they wouldn't pull any bullshit, and they would talk to me as we're going along the scene, versus people automatically telling me to get on my knees and worship them. And I'd be like, what?
Mm.
I don't know if it was a Southern thing or something. And I've talked to Lady D and some people. Some people used to think she was when she first began. I was like, oh, hell no. I mean, they would think the opposite. I'm going, no. Or I need another one that I keep bringing Midori up in Goddess Cecilia. I heard him talking about how people thought that Asian women were submissive. I'm going, not the ones I know. The automatically are submissive and they would do anything to please their masters or their tops.
Yeah, that makes me think of what you're saying earlier when, you run into people who are like that, being able doing the due diligence to let other people know, like, hey, actually these people or this base, like, just watch out. So I think that's something that's come to mind too, because I can't imagine going to a space and things like that happening, and wanting to make sure that that doesn't have to be the case for others.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I try to do when I'm in these spaces is that, I try not to police those spaces, but I try to let people know that, people are human and that they're still trying to figure their way, and not to make assumptions of what people can and can't do. And usually people are like, I don't know what to do. I said, have we talked to the person? Oh, I said, yeah, talking can help a whole lot.
Yeah. I think we just have to take that as a standard to not make assumptions, because again, this could be your play partner that you play with all the time, but today is different. Yesterday's rules are not today's rules. So being open to doing that legwork is essential.
All right, so kind of just to make sure we touch on this a bit more before we wrap up, I want to again kind of really dig a little bit deeper into aftercare and like what it is, and the importance of it when we're talking about BDSM and kink.
Okay. For me, aftercare is really important. Is like, aftercare is just basically making sure that you're coming down from that high. Because some people we didn't talk about this. Usually you feel a high, like a runner's high, when you're in a scene where you're playing with your partner. And then after you finish, you need to calm down. You can't just, drive home. That's a little dangerous. After a scene, you want to be able to come down and ground yourself. Just find some way where you can ground yourself and debrief. For me, aftercare is making sure you're grounded and taking care of yourself. Kind of recharge yourself. It can be, and I tell people, it can be anything from, fuzzy blankets. I carry fuzzy blankets in my backpack for scenes, so I can wrap my bottom and be like, hey, give you some sensory needs. You've taken a beating, let's start something soft so we can just get you grounded back to earth. Hydrate. It's a good thing.
Yes.
If you forget to water, I'm like, do you need water? Yes. Give them water, kind of hydrate themselves. Getting some food back, because you use a lot of that energy in the scene, in that play, and you need to get that energy to ground it and come back to you just a little bit. Let me give you an example of what to do, what it feels like to have aftercare, and what it feels like not to have aftercare. I'll do that not aftercare. Some tops, including myself, tend to forget that we need aftercare too. I did this great scene with somebody, lots of like humiliation, talking shit, hard sadistic stuff. I gave him a great aftercare. I'm driving home from the party. I feel myself getting lightheaded. So I have to pull over a couple times because I'm going, oh crap, I'm coming down from that scene.
Yeah.
I'm dropping, which aftercare is also good for making sure you don't have a sudden drop of feeling like shit. It's kind of like you feel like you have a cold, you feel like you're feeling guilty. So it's like, oh shit, I did not take care of myself. So I drove slowly home. Luckily, I didn't get pulled over by the cops. Got undressed, got in bed, and my partner could tell that I didn't do anything. So he was like, he woke up at 2:30 in the morning, just calming me down. And I realized I should have done that before I left the party, before I left the club.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't drop like that. Or my partner didn't drop. They call me in that stand. They're like, we got worried. I said, yeah, I won't do that again. Versus another great scene. Before the scene, my bottom asked, what is your aftercare? I said, I like to cuddle. I like to make out. They were like, okay, that's not past my limits. We can do that. I gave them aftercare. They gave me aftercare. I felt very grounded. I felt like I could just walk. Didn't feel like I was going to pass out. I could actually make some sense of the conversations I was having with people after I had the aftercare. And I felt great the next morning when I talked to him over the phone, like, hey, I'm feeling great. How are you feeling? Oh, I'm feeling good. I was like, yeah. Did you have a drop? I was like, no, we're good. You know, just making sure things happen. Just making sure you're good.
Yeah. Definitely a reminder that everyone needs and benefits from aftercare is important because it's so often centered around the submissive or the bottom or the person who was receiving the impact, and not checking in with the person who was providing that sensation or doing the act to the other person.
Right.
Because it can also bring up a lot too. If I'm doing humiliation play and I've been saying, like you said, talking shit and saying these really negative things to someone, I might feel some way about that a little bit later. And so, yeah, definitely taking the time to care for yourself and figuring out how we can co-care.
Exactly. And I tell people, and people were like, I don't need aftercare. I'm like, you need aftercare because you're going to have what they call a drop. I was like, what's that? You're going to feel like, you're going to feel really shitty. Your body's going to be aching. Your body is not going to be able to know how to, like, aftercare helps you process what just happened. Without aftercare, you're not able to process that or have someone to support you in the aftercare. They might feel shitty mentally. They might feel like they're getting sick. They might have a cold or the crud, and you don't really know what's going on until you talk to somebody like, oh, you just had a drop. And after you're seen, and they're like, did you get aftercare? No. Did they ask you? Sometimes a yes, sometimes a no. So when I hear the people say no, that's bad on the other person's part. But they said, yeah, I don't think I need it. And they realize, yeah, you needed it.
You know, we didn't touch on this, but I think it's great to also talk about subspace and dom space. Could you share a little bit about what that is?
Okay, sub and dom space are those yummy moments that you in the scene. For submissives, and I know this from when I used to bottom, you feel that high. You don't feel any pain. You feel like you're in the moment and you're really enjoying yourself. Sometimes people go silent when they're flying. I tell people they're flying. They're like it's kind of a high for them. Same with dominance. They might get a high from the fact that they're getting a really good response from this person and they really feel in the scene. They really feel they can push the person and they're feeling really, really great. And they're in that headspace and nothing, unless something dramatic happens, they don't snap out of it. They're going until the end of the scene. I see both the energy, basically you're changing energy between each other.
Yeah, thank you for definitely bringing that to the space, because that, I think, also then contributes to the importance of aftercare too, because that's what you're coming down from, right? So, well, with that, do you have any final thoughts for us and for, you know, some burgeoning kinksters out there?
Until kinksters, there's no such thing as dumb a question unless you don't ask. Ask away. If someone says a dumb question, you're like, and they make you feel small, don't let them make you feel small. Always ask questions. Always be curious, because someone in that same room might have that same question and been trying to get an answer themselves. Take up space in these kink spaces. I'm noticing that sometimes that people feel small and feel like they're not important in these spaces when they are, because they're active participants. Even if they're warriors, even if they're not doing anything, they're part of the space, and just take up that space, especially if you want to make it safe for others to be there.
Yeah, give yourself permission to show up and exist and explore with all of these demands on yourself, outside of making sure that consent is present, making sure consent is present, and prioritizing pleasure and safety.
Absolutely.
One more thought I just realized. Okay. You don't have to buy all the expensive toys.
Yes.
They are not cheap.
No.
So I like pervertibles.
Yes, that was going to say. That was going to say pervertibles. Pervertibles are your friends. Pervertibles are everyday items that around your house. Dollar Tree, Dollar General, Joann's. They can make into kink toys.
Yes, absolutely. Wooden spoons. Those little wooden paint mixer slabs. Yes. Those are great spanking items. Yeah. And if you don't have blindfolds, you can use scarves, neckties. Sometimes you just close your eyes. We don't have any of that. Close your eyes. You don't have nipple clamps? Get a sandwich bag. Clamp. Got to get creative.
Oh, I got something better. Get the tiny clothespins in the craft store. They're great for CBD and nipple clamps.
Yes. We can get creative here.
Absolutely. BDSM on a budget.
BDSM on a budget. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Miss K. This really was a pleasure. I always love talking about BDSM and kink, so this was a fun time for sure.
Thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your expertise as well as your experience.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me tonight. And I don't think you remember, we've met each other. You gave a wonderful speech at Sets Down South a couple of years ago when I first met you.
Well,
I want to thank you for that experience, because you opened up my eyes after that going like, damn, I was thinking small.
Oh, thank you, Miss K.
Yes, we love it.
Well, pleasure re-meeting you, and I will see you at Sex Down South, and we can maybe make some time to hang out a little bit more.
Oh, yeah. All right, well.
I'm party in the labyrinth.
I'll be there.
Love it.
Always.
I'm going to get down to one of these years. Well, thank you again, and thank you, listeners. Look out for the worksheet this week. We'll, provide you something around that desk card so that you can really have that tool when you enter that space to feel confident and comfortable to make sure you're having the experience that you want. And with that, next week, we have our final episode of our first season, y'all, where we'll be talking about gender and sexuality. So we're really excited about that piece to wrap us up. So,
see you then.
Bye.